The Valorian Dominion had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. Their empire stretched across 100 star systems, and they had conquered more than 200 species. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms, and they believed themselves to be the greatest civilization in the galaxy. No one had ever challenged them and survived. When their deep space sensors detected radio signals coming from a small blue planet called Earth, the Valorian High Council saw nothing special. The signals were primitive. The technology was basic. The species was young and weak. High Commander Zethrael, the most decorated warrior in the Dominion, was given a simple order: go to this new world, study these creatures, and claim them as property of the Empire. Zethrael took a fleet of 20 warships. It was far more than he needed, but he enjoyed showing his power. His ships were massive, each one carrying enough weapons to destroy a small moon. As they traveled through the darkness between stars, Zethrael read the reports about humanity. They had only recently learned to travel beyond their own planet. They had no defensive systems worth mentioning. It would be easy to control. The Valorian fleet arrived in human space on a cold morning in March. Their sensors immediately detected a large vessel moving slowly through the void. It was a colony ship called the Wanderer, carrying 12,000 sleeping humans to a new home in a distant star system. The ship had no weapons. It was not designed for war. It was designed to carry families, children, and dreamers to a fresh beginning. Zethrael did not bother to send a warning. He did not ask for surrender, simply gave the order to fire. The attack lasted 11 minutes. The Wanderer tried to run, but it was slow and heavy. Valorian weapons tore through its hull like paper. Emergency systems screamed warnings that no one could answer. The sleeping passengers never woke up. They died in their pods, dreaming of the new world they would never see. When it was over, Zethrael recorded a message for his superiors. He reported that first contact with humanity had been successful. The species had been shown the power of the Dominion. They would submit soon enough. He did not bother to count the dead. To him, they were not worth counting. On Earth, the news arrived 3 days later. Daniel Harper was sitting in his office at the United Nations Space Command headquarters in Houston when a young officer knocked on his door. The officer was pale and could not meet Daniel's eyes. Handed over a data tablet and left without saying a word. Daniel was 43 years old. He had served in the Space Forces for 20 years. He had a wife named Catherine and 2 daughters, Emma and Sophie. They had been on the Wanderer. They had been going ahead to prepare their new home while Daniel finished his final tour of duty. He was supposed to join them in 6 months. He watched the footage recovered from the Wanderer's emergency systems. He saw the Valorian ships appear from nowhere, saw the weapons fire. He saw the hull breach that killed his family. He watched it 3 times, memorizing every detail. Then he stood up, walked to the office of his commanding officer, and said 5 words: "I want to fight them." The Valorians made their second mistake 3 days after the attack. They sent a diplomatic vessel to Earth, carrying an ambassador who was supposed to explain the new reality to humanity. The ambassador was named Vethkal, and he had performed this duty many times before. He knew exactly what to say. He would tell the humans that they were now property of the Dominion. He would explain that resistance was pointless. He would offer them a choice between peaceful submission and total destruction. Vethkal landed his ship in New York City, in the middle of a great plaza surrounded by tall buildings. He expected fear. He expected panic. He expected the humans to fall to their knees and beg for mercy. Instead, he found soldiers. They surrounded his ship within seconds of landing. They did not speak. They did not threaten. They simply waited, their weapons pointed at every door and window. Vethkal felt something he had never felt before in all his years of diplomacy. He felt afraid. He was taken to a room deep underground where a group of humans sat waiting for him. Their faces were hard and cold. One of them was Daniel Harper. "You killed 12,000 of our people," said the woman at the head of the table. Her name was President Sandra Cole, and she had been elected on a promise of peace. That promise was now ashes. "You killed them without warning, without reason, without mercy." Vethkal tried to explain. He spoke of the Dominion's power. He spoke of the hundreds of species that had submitted and survived. He spoke of the benefits of cooperation and the horrors of resistance. He used every word he had used 100 times before. The humans listened in silence. When he finished, President Cole leaned forward. "You do not understand us," she said. "You think we are like the others you have conquered. You think we will count the cost and decide that peace is cheaper than war. You think we will forget our dead and move on?" She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city was quiet. Every screen, every radio, every device was broadcasting the same message. The people of Earth were learning what had happened to the Wanderer. They were learning the names of the dead. "We are not like the others," President Cole said. "We do not forget. We do not forgive. We do not stop." Vethkol was allowed to send one message to his superiors before he was placed in a cell. The message was simple. "I have made a terrible mistake. These creatures are not what we expected. They are something else entirely. Do not attack them again. Do not provoke them. Do not give them a reason to come for us." The message was received by High Commander Zethrael. He read it once, laughed, and deleted it. Within 6 hours of Vethkol's capture, every nation on Earth had signed the Unity Accords. For the first time in human history, there were no borders, no separate governments, no divided loyalties. There was only humanity, and humanity had a single purpose. Factories that had made cars began making weapons. Scientists who had studied medicine began studying war. Children who had dreamed of becoming artists and teachers began dreaming of becoming soldiers and pilots. Daniel Harper was given command of a new project. Its goal was simple: build ships that could reach the Valorian Dominion, build weapons that could hurt them, build an army that would never stop fighting until the last of the enemy had been destroyed. "How long will this take?" asked President Cole. Daniel looked at the plans spread across his desk. They were ambitious. They were expensive. They would require the entire resources of human civilization. 5 years, he said. "Give me 5 years, and I will give you a fleet." The president nodded. "You have them." Far away, in the heart of the Valorian Dominion, Zethrael was celebrating his promotion. He had been rewarded for his successful first contact with humanity. He was now the youngest High Commander in the history of the Empire. He did not know that his name had been written on a wall in Houston, Texas. He did not know that 12,000 other names were written alongside it. He did not know that every human child was being taught those names, being told to remember them, being asked to never forget. He did not know that he was already being hunted. 5 years had passed since the destruction of the Wanderer. 5 years of work, sacrifice, and preparation. 5 years of grief turned into fuel, of tears turned into steel, of broken hearts turned into weapons. The first human warship was called the Resolve. It was not the largest ship ever built, and it was not the most powerful. But it was fast, silent, and deadly. It had been designed for a single purpose: to cross the vast distance between human space and the Valorian Dominion without being detected. Daniel Harper stood on the bridge as the Resolve prepared to launch. He was 48 years old now, and the years had changed him. His hair had turned gray. His eyes had grown cold. He rarely smiled, and when he did, there was no warmth in it. He had become something new, something hard, something that lived only for revenge. Beside him stood Commander Lisa Monroe. She was 35 years old, and her brother had been on the Wanderer. He had been 22, just starting his adult life, excited about the adventure of colonizing a new world. Now his name was carved into the wall of the memorial in Houston, alongside 12,000 others. At the weapons station sat Lieutenant Kevin Park. He was young, only 26, but his eyes were old. His parents had been on the Wanderer. They had saved for years to afford the journey, wanting to give their son a better future. They had died without knowing that their son would grow up to become a warrior. Navigation was handled by Ensign Maria Santos. She was 28, with dark hair and steady hands. Her fiancés had been on the Wanderer, had planned to marry as soon as she finished her tour of duty. She still wore his ring on a chain around her neck. Every single crew member on the Resolve had lost someone in the attack. This was not an accident. This was deliberate policy. United Earth Council had decided that the first mission should be crewed by those who had the most reason to see it succeed. They called it the Mourner's Fleet, and every ship would be crewed by those who had lost family and friends. "Are we ready?" asked Daniel. "All systems are operational," replied Lisa. "The stealth field is active. We are invisible to their sensors." Daniel nodded. He looked at the crew, at their determined faces, at the pain they carried with them every day. He thought about his wife and daughters. He thought about the last message Catherine had sent him before the Wanderer launched. She had told him she loved him. She had told him she would see him soon. "Take us out," he said. The Resolve slipped away from Earth like a ghost, leaving no trace behind. It moved through the darkness between stars, silent and patient. A hunter stalking prey that did not know it was being hunted. The journey took 3 months. 3 months of cold space, recycled air, and careful planning. The crew trained every day. They studied the Valorian language, their customs, their weaknesses. They learned the names and faces of every Valorian commander who had participated in the attack on the Wanderer. But one name was more important than all the others. One face was burned into their memories. One target was the only one that truly mattered. The Valorians had prepared for human retaliation. They had expected the young species to attack their border worlds, to throw themselves against the Dominion's defenses in a desperate attempt at revenge. They had positioned their largest fleets at every likely entry point. They had fortified their frontier colonies with extra weapons and soldiers. But the humans did not come for their worlds. The Resolve slipped past the border fleets without being seen. It ignored the fortified colonies. It traveled deeper and deeper into Valorian space, moving through systems that had never known war, past worlds that had been at peace for centuries. The Valorians had made a critical mistake. They had assumed that humans would fight like every other species they had conquered. They had assumed that humans would want territory, resources, strategic advantages. They had prepared to defend against an invasion. They had not prepared to defend against a hunt. Daniel Harper did not want to conquer the Valorian Dominion. He did not want their planets, or their wealth, or their power. He wanted only one thing: the lives of those who had murdered his family. The Resolve tracked Zethral for weeks. They intercepted communications, analyzed patrol patterns, and slowly built a picture of his movements. They learned that he had been promoted after the attack on the Wanderer. They learned that he was considered a hero of the Dominion, celebrated for bringing a new species under Valorian control. They also learned that he was careless. Zethral believed himself to be safe. He was deep within the heart of the Empire, surrounded by loyal ships and soldiers. No enemy had ever reached this far into Valorian space. No enemy had ever tried. His flagship was found orbiting a pleasure world called Vethaner, in the inner territories of the Dominion. Zethral was attending a celebration in his honor, a grand party to commemorate his promotion and his many victories. He was surrounded by admirals and generals, politicians and nobles, all of them eager to praise his greatness. The Resolve arrived in the system at midnight, local time. It moved slowly, carefully, using the planet's moon as cover. Maria Santos guided the ship with perfect precision, using every trick she had learned to avoid detection. "We are in position," she reported. "The flagship is directly ahead. Range: 50,000 kilometers." Daniel stood at the center of the bridge. He looked at the image of Zethral's ship on the main screen. It was enormous, covered in gold and silver decorations, a symbol of Valorian power and arrogance. "Kevin," he said, "lock weapons." The young lieutenant's hands moved across his console. Weapons locked. Antimatter torpedo ready. Daniel thought about his daughters. Emma had been 14. Sophie had been 11. They had been so excited about the journey, about the adventure of seeing a new world. They had made plans for their new home. Emma wanted a room with a view of the mountains. Sophie wanted a garden where she could grow flowers. Fire. The torpedo launched from the Resolve in perfect silence. It crossed the 50,000 kilometers in seconds, moving too fast for any defense system to track. It struck Zethral's flagship exactly where Kevin had aimed, the main reactor. The explosion was beautiful and terrible. The flagship came apart in a ball of white fire, scattering debris across the void. There were no survivors. There could be no survivors. Zethrael died without knowing that the humans had found him. He died without understanding that his crime would never be forgotten. He died believing himself to be a hero. "Target destroyed," reported Kevin. His voice was steady, but there were tears in his eyes. "Take us out," said Daniel. "But first, send the message." Lisa activated the communication system. She broadcast on every frequency the Valorians used, in their own language, using words that had been carefully chosen over months of planning. "Remember, we will find you. This is only the beginning." The resolve vanished into the darkness before the Valorian response fleet could arrive. It left behind only fire and a promise. The Dominion's leadership reacted with fury. They declared the attack an act of terrorism. They promised that humanity would be crushed. They sent 50 of their finest warships to Earth, the orders to destroy everything. None of those ships returned. The humans were waiting for them. The resolve had been only the first of many ships. While Daniel Harper hunted Zethrael, others had been preparing the defense of Earth. The Valorian fleet arrived, expecting easy victory. They found instead a wall of weapons, a storm of missiles, the species that had spent 5 years preparing for exactly this moment. The battle lasted 2 days. When it was over, every Valorian ship had been destroyed. The humans did not take prisoners. They did not accept surrender. They fought until the last enemy was dead. And then they began to build more ships. The hunt had begun. It would not end until every Valorian who had participated in the attack on the Wanderer had paid the price. It would not end until the galaxy understood what happened. When you attacked humanity, it would not end until the humans decided to stop. And humans. The galaxy was learning, did not stop easily. 15 years had passed since the war began. 15 years of hunting, fighting, and dying. 15 years of revenge that showed no signs of ending. Admiral Lisa Monroe stood before the united Earth. Council in the great chamber beneath the mountains of Switzerland. She was 50 years old now, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that had not been there when the war started. She had inherited command of the fleet 3 years ago. After Daniel Harper died during the assault on the Valorian shipyards, Daniel had led the attack personally, refusing to stay behind on a safe command ship. He had said that he needed to see it with his own eyes, needed to watch the place where Valorian warships were built burn to ashes. A Valorian defender had gotten lucky with a missile strike. Daniel's ship had been destroyed instantly. Lisa remembered the last words he had spoken to her before the battle. "If I do not come back," he had said, "do not let them forget. Do not let them stop. Promise me," she had promised. She intended to keep that promise. "The Dominion is weakening," she told the Council. "In 15 years, we have killed over 200 of their high-ranking officers. We have destroyed 60% of their military shipyards. We have liberated 36 worlds from their control." Council members listened in silence. They were old men and women now, most of them. They had been young when the war started, full of anger and determination. The years had worn them down. Some of them were tired. Some of them wanted peace. "Their losses are severe," Lisa continued. "Our intelligence suggests that the Dominion leadership is considering peace negotiations." Chairman Gregory Adams leaned forward. He was 70 years old, and he had been on the council since the beginning. He had voted for war 15 years ago. Now, he looked like a man who had seen too much death. "What are their terms?" he asked. "They will return the remains of our people from the Wanderer. They will pay reparations to the families of the dead. They will withdraw all forces from human space and recognize our borders. They will release all human prisoners they have taken during the war. And in exchange, we stop hunting them." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Lisa could see the conflict on their faces. Part of them wanted to accept. Part of them wanted the killing to stop. 15 years was a long time. Generations of young people had grown up knowing nothing but war. But another part of them remembered. Another part of them could still see the footage of the Wanderer being torn apart. Another part of them could still hear the names of the 12,000 dead, recited every year on the anniversary of the attack. There is something else to consider, Lisa said. If we accept peace now, we will be abandoning the species who have risen up against the Dominion in hope of our protection. This was the complication that made everything harder. Humanity had not fought alone. Over the years, other species conquered by the Valorians had begun to resist. They had seen that the Dominion could be hurt, could be defeated, could be made to bleed. They had found hope where there had been none before. The Kathrani had been the first. They were small creatures, no bigger than human children, but they were clever and brave. They had sabotaged Valorian supply lines and provided intelligence to human forces. When the Valorians discovered their betrayal, they had begun to slaughter them. The Moravians had joined next. They were tall and thin, with forearms like the Valorians, but they had been slaves for 500 years. They had risen up and seized 3 of their own worlds, fighting with weapons the humans had provided. There were others. The Ventheri, the Solani, the Kresh, dozens, F species who had looked at humanity and seen something they had never seen before, a people who would not surrender, who would not forget, who would fight until the end. If we stop now, Lisa said, we leave them to face the Dominion alone. The Valorians will crush them. They will make examples of them. Billions will die because they trusted us. The debate lasted 3 days. Some council members argued that humanity had proven its point. They had shown the galaxy that attacking Earth had consequences. They had punished those responsible for the Wanderer. They had earned the right to peace. Others argued that peace now would be a betrayal. They pointed to the species who had risked everything to stand with humanity. They pointed to the promises that had been made, the alliances that had been formed, the blood that had been shared. On the 3rd day, Captain Maria Santos was called to speak. Maria was 43 years old now. She had been hunting Valorians for 15 years. She had commanded her own ship for 10 of those years. She had lost count of how many battles she had fought, how many enemies she had killed, how many friends she had buried. She still wore her fiancé's ring on a chain around her neck. I have a question for the council, she said. If we stop now, what happens the next time someone attacks us? What lesson will the galaxy learn? Chairman Adams frowned. What do you mean? The Valorians attacked us because they thought we were weak. They thought we would submit like every other species they had conquered. If we accept peace now, after only 15 years of war, what message does that send? She walked to the center of the chamber, where a holographic display showed a map of the galaxy. She pointed to Earth, a tiny dot in a vast sea of stars. There are thousands of species out there, she said. Some of them are watching us right now. They are deciding whether humanity is a threat or an opportunity. They are asking themselves, if I attack these creatures, what will happen? She turned to face the council. I want them to know the answer. I want them to know that if they attack humanity, we will never stop. We will hunt them across the galaxy. We will hunt them for years, for decades, for centuries if we have to. We will hunt them until the last of them is dead or until they give us everything we demand. Her voice was steady, but there was fire in her eyes. The Valorians killed 12,000 of our people. 12,000 innocent lives, destroyed without warning or mercy. If we accept peace now, we are saying that 12,000 lives can be bought off with apologies and money. We are saying that our dead can be forgotten for the right price. She shook her head. I will not forget. I cannot forget. And I do not believe that humanity should forget either. The vote was taken that evening. It was unanimous. The message sent to the Valorian Dominion was simple and clear. Return our dead. Release all your slaves. Disarm your fleets. Dissolve your empire. Submit your leaders to trial for their crimes. When you have done all of this, we will stop. Until then, we will continue to hunt you. The Valorians rejected the terms. They still believed they could win. They still thought that humanity would eventually grow tired, that the humans would count the cost of endless war and decide that peace was worth any price. They did not. Understand, humans did not count costs the way other species did. Humans did not weigh lives against resources, victory against sacrifice. Humans made promises to their dead, and they kept those promises no matter what they cost. Admiral Lisa Monroe received the Dominion's rejection in her office aboard the command ship Persistence. She read it once, then set it aside. "Orders to all fleet commanders," she said. "We continue the offensive. Target priority, remaining members of the original attack fleet. Secondary priority, anyone who ordered the destruction of the Wanderer." She looked out the window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the Valorians were preparing their defenses, gathering their forces, planning their strategy. It would not be enough. It would never be enough. "You remember?" she whispered to the darkness. "We will always remember," the hunt continued. 20-5 years had passed since the destruction of the Wanderer. 25 years of war without mercy, without pause, without end. 25 years that had transformed humanity from a young species taking its first steps into the galaxy, into something that made ancient. Empires tremble. The human fleet arrived at Valoria. Prime on a morning that the Valorians would remember forever. It came out of the darkness between stars like a storm. Hundreds of warships moving in perfect formation, their weapons ready. Their crews determined. Admiral Maria Santos commanded from the bridge of the Remembrance. She was 62 years old, her hair completely gray now, her face marked by decades of war. She had spent more than half her life fighting. She had lost friends, comrades, and loved ones. She had killed more enemies than she could count. She still wore her fiancé's ring on a chain around her neck. She had never taken it off. The Remembrance was the largest ship in the human fleet, built specifically for this mission. Its hull was covered in names, 12,000 names etched into the metal in letters that could be seen from orbit. Every ship in the fleet carried those names. Every crew member knew them by heart. "Admiral," said Captain Kevin Park from his position at the tactical station. He was 51 years old now, a veteran of more battles than he could remember. "The Valorian Defense Fleet is moving to intercept." Maria studied the display. The Valorians had gathered everything they had left to defend their homeworld. 200 warships, the last of their once mighty navy, formed a wall between the humans and Valoria Prime. "How many civilian vessels have left the planet?" she asked. "Thousands," Kevin replied. "They have been evacuating for weeks. The population has been reduced by 60%. Good." Some in the fleet had wanted to destroy the evacuation ships. They had argued that the Valorians deserved to suffer, as humanity had suffered, that their civilians should pay for the crimes of their leaders. Maria had forbidden it. She had not come to commit genocide. She had come to end a war. "Open a channel to the Valorian command ship," she ordered. The face that appeared on the screen was old and tired. The current High Commander of the Valorian Dominion was named Kethphos. He was the 7th to hold the position since the war began. The previous 6 had all died at human hands. Zethral had been the first. Then came Vornak, killed when humans destroyed his command base. Then Shalith, assassinated on a world he thought was safe. Then Krathorn, Vetzel, and Morthal. Each one hunted down and killed no matter where they tried to hide. Kethphos had survived only because he had never directly participated in the attack on the Wanderer. He had been a minor official when the war began, rising through the ranks as his superiors were killed, one by one. "It's Admiral Santos," he said. "You have come to destroy us," Maria replied. "I have come to give you a choice," she transmitted the terms. They were the same terms that had been offered 10 years ago and 15 years before that. Full dissolution of the Dominion. Freedom for all conquered species. War crimes trials for those responsible for the attack on the Wanderer. A permanent human presence in Valorian space to ensure compliance. "These terms are the death of our civilization," Kethphos said. "Civilization died 25 years ago," Maria replied. "You killed it when you destroyed the Wanderer. Everything since then has been borrowed time." Kethphos was silent for a long moment. Behind him, Maria could see other Valorians moving, speaking in hushed voices, their faces showing fear and despair. "And if we refuse?" he finally asked. "Then we will stay here until you agree. We have waited 25 years. We can wait longer. We can wait forever if we have to. You would starve our world." We would blockade your world until you accept our terms. Your people can continue to evacuate. We will not stop them. But no supplies will reach Valoria Prime until this war is over. Kethvos leaned forward. His eyes were searching her face, looking for something he could use, some weakness he could exploit. Your people must hate us very much, he said. Maria thought about this. She thought about her fiancés, whose face she could barely remember now after all these years. She thought about Daniel Harper, who had died believing that his family would be avenged. She thought about Lisa Monroe, who had commanded the fleet for 10 years before a Valorian assassin finally caught up with her. She thought about all the human lives that had been lost in this war, all the sacrifices that had been made. No, she said finally, we do not hate you. Hate is hot. Hate burns bright and then fades. What we feel is something colder and deeper than hate. We remember. We remember every name, every face, every life you took from us. And we will never stop remembering. Then there can be no peace between us. There can be peace. But it will be our peace, on our terms. You started this war. We will decide how it ends. Kethvos closed his eyes. When he opened them again, Maria saw something she had never expected to see in a Valorian's face. Acceptance. Your species is terrifying, he said quietly. Do you know that? In 3,000 years of conquest, we have never met anything like you. Other species fight for territory, for resources, for power. They make calculations. They weigh costs against benefits. They know when to surrender, and we do not. No, you do not. You fight for your dead. You fight for revenge. You fight because you made a promise, and you will not break that. Promise no matter what it costs you. He shook his head slowly. We thought you were primitive when we first found you. We thought you would be easy to control. We could not have been more wrong. Maria said nothing. She waited. I need time, Kethvos said. I must consult with my people. This decision cannot be made by one person. You have 3 days, Maria replied. After that, we begin the blockade. The channel closed. Maria turned to face her crew. They were watching her with expressions of hope and fear, eager for the war to finally end, but afraid to believe it might actually happen. Do you think they will accept? Asked Kevin, as Maria said. They have no choice. They have been losing this war for 25 years. Their fleet is a shadow of what it once was. Their empire has crumbled. Their conquered species have risen up against them. They know that if they refuse, we will destroy them completely. She looked at the image of Valoria Prime on the main display. It was a beautiful world, covered in blue oceans and green continents, not so different from Earth. Billions of Valorians lived there, most of them innocent of any crime. Most of them born after the war began. I do not want to destroy them, she said quietly. I never wanted that. I only wanted justice. I only wanted them to understand that what they did to us can never be forgotten and never be forgiven.
Oh.
The 3 days passed slowly. The human fleet maintained its position, watching the Valorian defense ships, waiting for an answer. On Valoria Prime, debate raged in the halls of power. Some wanted to fight to the death. Others wanted to surrender and hope for mercy. On the 3rd day, Kethvos appeared on the communication screen again. His face was calm, but there was defeat in his eyes. We accept your terms, he said. The Valorian Dominion surrenders unconditionally. We will release all slaves, disarm our fleets, and submit our leaders to trial. We ask only one thing in return. What is that? Remember us. Remember that we were once a great civilization. Remember that we made a terrible mistake and paid for it with everything we had. Remember us so that others might learn from our fate. Maria nodded slowly. We will remember, she said. That is what we do. That is what we have always done. The war was over. 50 years had passed since the end of the Valorian War. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Dominion was gone, broken into 100 smaller states, its people scattered across the stars. The species they had once enslaved were free, building their own civilizations, charting their own futures, and humanity had become something new, the Galactic. Council met in a great station orbiting a neutral world, far from any empire's territory. Representatives from 300 species gathered there to discuss trade, treaties, and the future of known space. It was a place of diplomacy and cooperation, where ancient enemies could sit together and talk instead of fight. A young diplomat from the Rithian collective DoNot stood before the assembly to ask a question that had puzzled his species for generations. The Rethanes were newcomers to galactic politics, having achieved space travel only a century ago. They were curious creatures, always asking questions, always seeking to understand. "I wish to ask the human representative a question," he said. "If I may." The human ambassador was a woman named Claire Bennett. She was young by human standards, barely a century old, with dark skin and kind eyes. She had been chosen for this post because she understood history better than most, because she knew where her species had come from, and why they had become what they were. "Of course," she said. "Ask whatever you wish." The Rithian diplomat gathered his thoughts. His species had studied humanity for decades, trying to understand these strange creatures who had risen from nothing to become one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. They had read the histories, watched the recordings, analyzed every detail, but one thing still confused them. "The humans could have conquered the Valorians," he said. "After the war, you had the power. You had the justification. No one would have blamed you. Why did you stop? Why did you not take their worlds for yourselves?" Claire smiled. It was a gentle smile, but there was something old behind it, something that had been passed down through generations. "Because conquest was never our goal," she explained. "We did not want their worlds or their resources. We did not want to rule them or enslave them. We wanted them to understand something." "Understand what?" "That there are species in this galaxy who will forgive an attack and move on. There are species who will accept apologies and reparations and consider the matter closed. There are species who will weigh the cost of war against the benefits of peace and decide that letting old wounds heal is the wisest choice." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We are not one of those species." The Rithian diplomat considered this. His people valued efficiency above all else. They made decisions based on logic and calculation. The idea of holding a grudge for generations seemed wasteful to them. "Is that not inefficient?" he asked. "Surely holding grudges for so long is a poor use of resources. The war cost you millions of lives and decades of progress. Would it not have been better to accept peace earlier, to save those lives in that time?" "Perhaps," Claire admitted. "By pure calculation, you might be right. But humans do not make decisions by calculation alone. We make decisions with our hearts as well as our minds, and our hearts do not forget." She stood and walked to the great window that looked out over the stars. Somewhere out there, far beyond the light of this neutral station, the descendants of the Wanderer's crew had finally built the colony their ancestors had dreamed of. It had taken 50 years longer than planned, but the dream had not died. "Consider this," she said. "In the 50 years since the Valorian War ended, no species has attacked humanity. Not once. Not a single raid, not a single border skirmish, not a single act of aggression against any human world or ship. Because they fear you," the Rithian said. "Because they remember. They remember what happened to the Valorians. They remember that we did not stop until the last of those responsible had faced justice. They remember that we carved the names of our dead into our warships and carried them across the galaxy." Claire turned to face the assembly. "They remember that we will hunt forever." There was silence in the great chamber. Representatives of 300 species looked at the human ambassador, and in their eyes there was respect, fear, and something that might have been understanding. "The Valorians thought we were weak," Claire continued. "They thought we were young and primitive and easy to control. They killed 12,000 of our people without warning or mercy, expecting us to submit like every other species they had conquered. They learned too late that we are different." "Different how?" asked another diplomat, this one from the Moravian Federation. The Moravians had fought alongside humanity during the war. They knew better than most what humans were capable of. "We are a species that forms attachments," Claire explained. "We love our families, our friends, our communities, our worlds. We love deeply and completely in ways that some species find strange. And when something we love is taken from us, that love does not die. It transforms into something else. Into what? Into memory. Into determination. Into a promise that we will never break, no matter how long it takes to keep it. She returned to her seat and looked at the Rithyon diplomat. You ask why we did not conquer the Valorians. The answer is simple. We did not need to. We needed only to show the galaxy what happens when you attack humanity. We needed only to teach a lesson that would never be forgotten. We needed only to make sure that no one would ever make the same mistake again. The Rithyon diplomat returned to his collective with a single recommendation. Under no circumstances should any action be taken that might harm a human being. No raids on human ships. No disputes over human territory. No insults to human honor. Nothing that might wake the sleeping beast. The recommendation was accepted unanimously. Years later, a young Valorian historian traveled to Earth to study the species that had destroyed his ancestors' empire. He visited the memorial in Houston, where the names of the 12,000 were carved into black stone. He walked through the museum that told the story of the war. He spoke with old humans who remembered the beginning, and young humans who had learned about it in school. He asked them all the same question. Do you still hate us? The answers were always the same. No, we do not hate you. We remember you. We remember what your ancestors did. We remember the names of our dead. But hate is too small a word for what we feel. Hate fades. Memory does not. Before he left Earth, the historian visited the shipyard, where the remembrance was preserved as a monument. The old warship hung in orbit, its hull still covered with 12,000 names, its weapons silent but not forgotten. Human children came there on school trips to learn about the war. They touched the names and recited them aloud. Keeping the memory alive, the historian stood before the ship for a long time, thinking about what his species had done and what had been done in return. He thought about the empire that had seemed eternal, now scattered and broken. He thought about the arrogance that had led to destruction, and he understood, finally, why the galaxy feared humanity. It was not because humans were the strongest, or the smartest, or the most numerous. It was because humans made promises to their dead and kept them. It was because